The aroma of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie filled the air, mingling with the hum of family chatter. I adjusted my silk blouse, smoothing a wrinkle I knew nobody would notice. My heels clicked softly against the hardwood as I carried my wine glass to the dining table, my reflection catching in the polished surface. Everything looked perfect, cheerful, warm, the kind of Thanksgiving that should make your heart full. And yet, mine felt hollow. The speeches had started. My parents, standing tall, began naming each of my siblings in turn, offering heartfelt thanks for achievements, kindness, and the little ways they had made life easier for everyone. Laughter, applause, hugs, they received it all. Except me. My name was skipped. For a split second, heat flared across my cheeks, but I swallowed it, smiled, and lifted my glass in a quiet, private toast to myself. I could feel my phone vibrate in my purse, probably another client checking in, another appointment in my packed schedule, but I ignored it. Let them see me as calm, collected, unshakable. I took a deep breath, inhaling the mingling scents of cinnamon and pine from the centerpiece, and let the irony of it sink in. After years of being overlooked, of being the invisible one, I was finally here, in my power. And I would not need anyone's applause to prove it. I reached into my bag, pulled out my camera, and snapped a photo, just me in the middle of the chaos, poised, untouchable, smiling. I remember the Thanksgiving 5 years ago, with vivid clarity. Back then, I was 23, freshly out of college, trying to find my footing. I had returned home, suitcase in hand, brimming with ideas and ambition, but my family saw only the mistakes I had made, the internships I hadn't landed, the money I had wasted, the uncertain future I represented. That night, my parents stood at the head of the table, praising my siblings one by one. My older brother, Justin, had just gotten a promotion. My younger sister, Claire, had won an art competition. Everyone was celebrated, everyone, that is, except me. I swallowed the lump in my throat, my hands trembling as I reached for the mashed potatoes. "Why don't you ever get recognized, Sam?" My best friend from college had asked me on the phone later that night. She didn't know my family, didn't know the sting of being invisible in my own home. Grandma had noticed, though. She handed me a small, worn journal from her bookshelf when I visited her the next week. "You don't need their applause to shine, Samantha," she said, her eyes gentle but firm. "Write your story. Build your life the way you want it. They'll catch up or they won't, but that's not for you to worry about." That journal became my secret companion. Late nights, scribbling ideas, planning my career, my business, my escape. Every word was a promise to myself. I would not rely on their recognition to define me. By the time I packed my things and left for the city, I was trembling with a mix of fear and resolve. Fear of the unknown, but a blazing determination to create my own world, one that would eventually leave them speechless. I moved to Chicago with nothing but a suitcase, my grandmother's journal, and a stubborn determination. My first apartment was tiny, barely enough room for a bed and a desk, but it became my sanctuary. The walls were bare, except for a small photo of Grandma smiling, the caption she'd written underneath. "Shine, Samantha. Shine anyway." I started at a marketing firm where no one knew my family history or my insecurities. The first weeks were brutal. Long nights hunched over spreadsheets, fumbling through client presentations, learning to speak in a way that commanded respect. I often stared at my reflection in the dark window of my office, feeling invisible, yet resolutely unwilling to quit. There were moments when doubt gnawed at me, when rejection emails piled up or a campaign flopped, but each time I opened Grandma's journal and reminded myself, "They won't decide your worth. You will." It was during one late evening at the office that I met Margaret Price, a senior executive who noticed the meticulous way I organized my projects. She offered mentorship almost immediately. "You've got vision, Samantha," she said, "but you need to own it. Stop shrinking to fit other people's expectations." Her words were a spark I hadn't realized I needed. From there, my life changed in quiet increments. The first big client I landed felt like a miracle. The first profitable campaign I executed made me feel untouchable in a way no family praise ever had. I opened my own consultancy within 2 years, a boutique firm that attracted clients who valued creativity, strategy, and precision. Every small win was a secret badge of honor. I never bragged, never posted photos, never sent family updates. Keeping my success hidden became part of the thrill. On social media, I posted mundane lifestyle updates, a coffee cup in the morning, a scenic weekend walk. No one would guess that my firm had doubled in revenue last quarter, that I owned 2 properties outright, or that I traveled the world for work, closing deals in London, Paris, and Tokyo. My life was a mosaic of accomplishments they couldn't see. Evenings were my favorite, quiet, reflective, triumphant. I'd sit on my balcony, city lights twinkling, sipping tea, and run through the list of achievements in my head. Every client, every promotion, every late night became a victory lap I didn't need anyone to witness. Grandma had been right. Applause wasn't necessary. My life, my victories, my story, I owned them. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a tiny, mischievous part of me longed for the moment when they would see it, not in words, but in undeniable reality. That moment would come. Thanksgiving arrived again, 5 years later. The house smelled exactly the same, roast turkey, sage stuffing, baked apples. But this year, the difference was me. I had returned not as the overlooked, uncertain daughter, but as someone they had never imagined. My parents, siblings, cousins, all bustling in the kitchen, laughing, trading stories. I walked in wearing a tailored dress, my hair neatly styled, heels clicking softly against the floorboards. I carried a small camera in one hand and a leather clutch in the other, my posture straight, my presence undeniable. The room quieted slightly. They weren't used to seeing me like this. Dinner began, and the speeches started. My parents, naturally, launched into their usual pattern, thanking everyone, my siblings, cousins, friends. Applause, hugs, laughter. And yes, as usual, my name was skipped. But this time I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. I simply lifted my camera and snapped a photo, the shutter sound sharp and deliberate. It was a quiet statement, a subtle mark of presence. When dinner ended, I offered to take everyone's group photo. As I lined them up, I felt the same surge of satisfaction I had felt 5 years ago in my empty apartment, late at night, whispering to Grandma's journal. I let them chatter, joke, and shuffle, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. After the photo, I stepped forward. "There's something I want you all to see," I said calmly, projecting confidence, letting the words linger. I opened my laptop, projected my business portfolio onto the living room screen, awards, media mentions, and financial highlights. My firm's name flashed in bold letters, along with numbers that would make any skeptic pause. I explained my role as founder and CEO, my travels for high-profile clients, and my properties and investments, all quietly amassed over the last 5 years. The room fell silent. Eyes widened. My parents' jaws tightened. Justin looked like he'd been punched. Claire's face turned pale, a mixture of shock and guilt etched across her features. Even my younger cousin, usually so full of chatter, swallowed hard. "I wanted you to see this, not just hear about it," I continued. "I never needed your recognition to succeed, but I wanted you to know that being invisible doesn't make anyone weak." I paused, letting my words settle. Some of them looked like they were grappling with shame. Others couldn't hide admiration. And then, with deliberate calm, I clicked my camera again, capturing the moment, the mixture of disbelief, regret, and awe in their faces. This time, I wasn't just observing. I was documenting the truth, the power of my own story. No anger, no yelling. Just truth. Just presence. Just proof that I had built a life they had dismissed, a life they could no longer ignore. After the initial shock, I let the silence linger a few moments longer. I could feel the shift in the room, an unspoken acknowledgement that I was no longer the overlooked, timid daughter. I had the upper hand now, and with it came a responsibility of my own choosing. "I'm willing to help, but on my terms," I began, my voice calm but firm. "Everyone here needs to commit to growth, change, and respect. Not for me, for yourselves." My parents exchanged glances, a mixture of defensiveness and curiosity. I continued. Mom, Dad, I love you, but you've spent years defining success for us in ways that didn't include individuality or effort. If you want to continue supporting me or even being part of my life, you need to honor that independence. That means no backhanded comments, no comparisons, and no undermining my choices. Justin, my older brother, finally spoke a little shakily. And what about me? I smiled softly, but my tone remained steady. You need to stop competing for approval at the expense of others. You're brilliant, Justin, but you've spent too long measuring yourself against someone else's idea of success. Channel that energy into your work, your passions, and your relationships, not into trying to outshine someone else at the dinner table. Claire, my younger sister, bit her lip, guilt washing over her face. And me. You're incredibly talented, Claire, but you hide behind constant perfectionism and the need to please everyone, I said. You need to take risks without fear of judgment, follow your art wherever it leads, and stop waiting for validation from anyone. I paused, letting each of them process the expectations. Then I addressed the extended family, the cousins who had always silently measured themselves against me. Everyone here has potential, but growth takes honesty. Toxic habits, resentment, laziness, they all have to go if you want to be a family worth being part of. I'll support you, but only if you commit to changing the patterns that have held us back. There was a moment of quiet reflection. I could feel the tension slowly transforming into tentative acceptance. The power dynamic had shifted. I was no longer seeking acknowledgement. I was setting the terms for connection, growth, and accountability. Finally, I closed my laptop, letting the image of my achievements fade from the screen. I'm proud of you all, in the ways that matter, I said. But from now on, our relationships will be based on respect, integrity, and honesty, not hierarchy, favoritism, or neglect. They nodded, some reluctantly, some gratefully. I could see the seed of change in their eyes, the realization that the rules had changed and that I had been the one to set them. For the first time, I felt fully aligned with my own life, unburdened by old patterns, yet compassionate enough to offer guidance. It was a delicate balance of power and care, strength and empathy. I had been invisible once, dismissed countless times, but now, finally, I was not only seen, I was respected, and I was in control. The weeks after Thanksgiving were quietly transformative. Justin started a small project he had always dreamed of, one that had nothing to do with comparison or competition. Claire took her first solo art exhibition, nervous but radiant, finally trusting her talent without fear of judgment. My parents, slowly, learned to ask questions instead of offering unsolicited advice, listening instead of lecturing. I watched these changes unfold with a mixture of relief and quiet pride. It wasn't instant perfection, but it was growth, the kind that mattered. And I realized, as I sat in my sunlit apartment one Sunday morning, that I was no longer tethered to the invisible chains of their past dismissals. My victories weren't just numbers, awards, or properties. They were the strength I had cultivated and the respect I had earned. I reached for the journal Grandma had given me all those years ago. Its worn cover felt comforting under my fingers. I opened it and smiled at her familiar handwriting. You don't need their applause to shine. I had carried those words through doubt, struggle, and long nights, and now they resonated louder than ever. I looked through the photos I had taken during that Thanksgiving, the shocked faces of my family, the mixture of guilt and awe frozen in a single moment. I had captured more than their reactions. I had captured my own triumph. That camera, my silent witness, reminded me that life's most important victories often don't need an audience. They simply need to be lived fully. Sitting by the window, sunlight streaming across the floor, I sipped my coffee and felt a gentle warmth in my chest. I had built my life on my terms, shaped my destiny without waiting for validation, and had even managed to guide the people I loved toward growth without losing myself in the process. For a long moment, I closed my eyes, feeling the journey, the pain, the perseverance, the subtle victories, the bold leaps of faith. I had been invisible once, but never again. And as the aroma of morning cinnamon filled the apartment, I whispered to myself, softly but firmly, I am seen. I am enough. And I shine. Always on my own terms. It was a quiet victory, a personal declaration, a voice-over-worthy truth that no speech, no thanks, and no family acknowledgement could ever take away. And in that moment I knew. The story I had lived, captured in photos, memories, and my own hard-won confidence, was mine and mine alone.